All right. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What time is it there?
It is just after 8 in the evening.
And it's still light out.
Yeah, it's light until about 11 p.m. here in Norway. So we are
Jeez.
the land of the midnight sun, is what they call it. So yeah, you
But
can expect
you're not
long
too
days
far
here.
north, right? Do you get midnight sun in your part? Yeah, where are you in Oslo?
Yeah, I mean, Oslo's pretty far south. So
Okay.
I'd say during the summer, you get this kind of twilight in the middle of the night, but
Okay.
you don't get the full midnight sun. I traveled to the north last year and I got the full effect. It was really weird.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. You were, how far north is it past Iceland? Because I went to Iceland and you went to Iceland earlier in the year last year as well. But
Yeah.
you didn't go during that time of year. I felt like it fried my brain.
Yeah, I was up at like 5 in the morning and I haven't done that for a very long time willingly.
Yeah, no,
But it was like
seriously.
you don't get tired. So
Yeah, yeah, you don't get tired, but I felt affected, if that makes sense,
yeah.
right? I wasn't tired, but I definitely felt like out of it. Because I think it was, I mean, I'd be finishing dinner, and then we'd drive around or do something, and then realize that it was already 11 p.m. and
Yeah.
it looked like this, and it was weird, right?
It's pretty weird.
Yeah,
You
how
have
far?
to, your body, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Your body what?
Your body like knows it's supposed to be going to sleep,
Mm,
but then it's just really hard to like get into the sleepy mode. So
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
strange.
And then there's like blackout. There's no blackout curtains in some Airbnbs, so you're just I didn't have a mask, so it was just so difficult, you know. But I mean, I didn't even let you give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Alyssa. I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Uh-huh.
But I've been a lot of places. So I guess I kind of can back up. I was actually born in Indiana.
Right.
I moved to Connecticut when I was little, and then I
Uh-huh.
finally moved to New Mexico when I was about 5 years old
Hmm.
because of my dad's job.
Right.
I
He
don't
was
know
an
if you,
academic, right? Was he at
yeah,
Purdue?
he was a professor.
Okay.
So he got a job at the University of New Mexico, and that meant we all moved to New Mexico, which I'm very grateful for because I'm happy I grew up there. Loved it. I basically had a pretty unremarkable childhood as far as most things go. My parents are half Peruvian, half Cuban, so I grew up with like one was
Mhm.
Peruvian, one was Cuban.
Okay.
So I grew up with a lot of like different cultures around me.
Hmm. Hmm.
I always was really interested in travel. I loved visiting family.
Yeah.
So I guess I started to, nothing really interesting happened until I went to college at the University of New Mexico. I
Hmm.
started my bachelor's there in 2006. And I was right away really interested in the idea of going to study abroad.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, I can kind of give my life story. You can jump in if you'd like, or we can stop along the way because I know
No,
there's
no, no,
probably a lot.
absolutely. No, you do have a really great story, and I think a big part of it is that I've kind of seen you in bits and pieces when you were back in Albuquerque, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm grateful for because I met you really randomly at Frontier one night. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember this. Yeah, and I was like,
Long time
a
ago.
long time ago. I think we were about 18, maybe
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
18 or 19. And yeah, it's just it's like a lot. You and Heather are, and even Andres. I think we were all hanging out with Andres at that time. Were some of the people I never expected to meet, and I met
Yeah,
randomly, and I feel like are the some of the people I've known the longest, right? And are friends that I've known the longest. So I'm
yeah.
grateful for that. But yeah, no, I mean, feel free. I mean, you said it wasn't interesting, and until college. Do you feel like that's because that's when you really started traveling?
Well, I mean, I would say I think it was unremarkable in the sense that nothing crazy happened. I mean, I was very
Mm,
lucky to have my mom, my dad, my two sisters.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We grew up loving to read. We grew up in
Right.
a very loving environment. We knew our parents were there for us. I loved growing up with two sisters as well.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of interesting stuff happened, but in terms of, remarkable events, it was
Mm-hmm.
probably you know, it was fairly unremarkable, though I did find a lot of things that I loved doing during that time. So
Yeah.
I loved public speaking. So I did a lot of debate. I
Mm-hmm.
started doing mock trial when I was in high school. I loved doing that, which I would do later in college as well. And I
Yeah.
can't, I can't underestimate the how lucky I was to have like a really loving and stable childhood in a
Mm-hmm.
place that I loved to be, and like
Yeah.
parents who would teach me, who would teach me how to
Yeah.
ride my bike and stuff. So yeah,
I mean, it's, yeah, it's, I think it's very important. I think something I remember, I think you had said at some point that you were fond of how that you got the love of reading and literature or just academia from your parents, right?
yeah,
And I think that's something that's it's very awesome. That's something I'm trying to, I thought of that and I was like, oh, cool. Cause that's something I'm trying to do in my own children
oh,
and
amazing.
foster that love for reading and for academia. And I mean, how much of the, how much of would you say of your kind of background that is dual identity? You're Peruvian, you're Cuban, you're American, you're moving around, parent, dad's in academia. Like, how much of that influenced what you did? And what did you study again in your undergrad?
Well, I started with political science and then
Mm.
I actually changed to economics. So I
Oh,
graduated with economics with a minor in politics.
okay. Okay. And I mean, was it everything that you'd gone through and up until that point kind of influenced your path, would you say?
Yeah, I think my parents were both extremely supportive of everything that my sisters and I wanted to do. My
Uh-huh.
sister would go on to become an artist, for example. So my
Oh.
parents, I think my dad in particular, I mean, both my parents really, when we were interested in something, they would get really interested in it. And I think
Mm.
that was so nice because I know some parents have an idea of what their kids should be.
Yeah.
My dad would like buy every single book about the topics that we were interested in. So
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, and they would try as much as possible to give us the opportunity to do the things that we wanted to do within reason. They would say no to us at times, but I think that their support was definitely so important in giving me the confidence to go on and to travel and to eventually live abroad. And
Yeah.
what I look back on was like a ridiculous move, but I had so much love in my spirit that I had the confidence to do it. So
So let's go one trip at a time. Let's do that. What was your first time abroad? I mean, in college, I guess.
yeah, so I studied in Spain from 2007 to 2008.
In
So that
Granada,
was
right?
definitely my first extended trip
Hmm.
abroad.
Yeah, in Granada.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And I mean, I studied abroad there later on, but how was that
Mhm.
for you? How was that? How did that shift how you looked at the world?
I think it was so interesting because I saw a different way of living. I saw
Mm.
a world in which you could walk around instead of driving. I saw a
Mm.
world in which people would be multi generational, groups of people would hang out in plazas, and
Hmm.
you could. I discovered just another pace of life.
Yeah.
And I felt very at home with that sort of way of life in a way
Mm.
that I had been searching for.
Yeah.
So I think it was great, and obviously it's not easy always to adjust to a new culture,
Yeah.
but that was great. I was also only 19 at the time. I had
Hmm.
fun. I met people from all over the world, so
Hmm.
it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, and it really expands your world. And I think the meeting the different
Yeah,
people is always fun. I mean, but you grew up speaking Spanish, right?
yeah,
Um,
I did.
yeah.
Yeah, my mom
So
always spoke to us in particular.
okay, and I think a lot of people really, for at least for me in my experience, they were like, "Why didn't you go study abroad in the country where you wanted to learn the language?"
Right.
And I think because how I mean, my experience with Spanish in the U.S. was that English became my dominant language, even though Spanish was my first.
Mhm.
So Spain, like living in Spain, really helped kind of maybe work out the iron out those kinks or the
Mhm.
wrinkles in my language speaking. Did it kind of do the same thing for you, or did you feel that
Yeah.
yeah, it did?
I completely agree with what you've said. I grew up it's funny because when I look back when my mom
Hmm.
talked to me, I wouldn't be able to tell you if she told me in English or Spanish. That's the level of
Yeah,
fluidity I have between the
right,
two languages. But
right.
when it comes to speaking, I was always much more comfortable in English.
Hmm.
We would travel to Peru occasionally, but I
Yeah.
mean, remember, this is in the 90s. We were a family
Hmm.
of 4 and then 5, and it was expensive to take the entire family to Lima.
Yeah.
So we would stay in touch with our Cuban and Peruvian relatives, but
Yeah.
that was, calls once in a while.
Hmm.
My parents did their best. My mom always spoke to us in Spanish. My dad, English, Spanish. We were
Hmm.
definitely passively fluent, but it wasn't until Spain that I was speaking Spanish all
Yeah.
the time. I was speaking about economics, I was speaking about
Right.
politics, I was speaking
Hmm.
about everything. So it definitely ironed out a lot of that.
Yeah, no, it really did. And it's you went to Granada. You didn't go to the institute, right, to learn languages. You went to the actual university.
Yeah, so it
Okay.
was full immersion.
Yeah, yeah, which I think is really good. So many of the students that went to just the language academy didn't actually go.
Yeah, yeah,
And most of them just ended up partying. And I mean, I
yeah.
was right
There
there
was
with
a lot
them, but
to
I,
do in
yeah,
Granada.
yeah. And I was there with them, but I also, I mean, I had finals to do in the language on the subject matter that I was studying. So that really helped. I absolutely agree with you. So, I mean, you came back to the US. How was that reverse culture shock for you? And I mean, did it, obviously you've left. I mean,
Yeah.
did he just kind of taint the US for you?
No, I love the US and I love New Mexico as well. I mean,
Okay.
the thing is the thing is that I think what it did was that I was hungry for more.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
what I did immediately, I mean, before I even got back to the US, was that I got a job in the International Student Office in the University of
Yeah,
New Mexico,
I
so that
remember.
I could just keep learning. I had this like craving to continue to learn about different cultures and to
Hmm.
find my place in the world. And I felt at the time that Albuquerque was too small for me. And I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
yeah, and I think like growing up and becoming older, I appreciate Albuquerque in a way that I never did at the time, and I couldn't because I
Hmm.
was too young.
Hmm.
And I think any place feels small when you are 19, 20 years old and you just want
Yeah.
to be part of this big world.
Hmm.
Um, so I came back and I started working in the International Student Organization. I was able to meet people still from all over the world, people
Hmm.
with whom I felt more at home almost than the people that I had grown up with.
Yeah.
So that was an easy way of doing it. I was lucky enough to get a full ride to college, so I was
Hmm.
able to save up and travel during the
Oh, nice.
summers and
Yeah.
during spring breaks. I was also part of World. I don't know what it's called now, but at
It's
the
the
time it was
World
called the World
Affairs
Affairs
delegation.
Delegation.
Yeah, still the same. Yeah. I had some of
Oh,
my
great.
students. Yeah,
Okay.
some of my students were part of it when I was teaching at UNM, and I was like, "Oh, I remember being part of that group
Yeah.
too." I'm this old man, but yeah.
Yeah, we were able to travel a lot with them as well, to Taiwan. That was my first time anywhere in Asia,
Mm,
and to Amsterdam, for example, The
yeah.
Hague. So I was able to travel quite a bit, even though I was back home.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's one thing about Albuquerque that I really like is that I mean, you're able to afford the cost of living here,
Mhm.
and save up to go to travel to other places. Whereas if I lived in like an expensive city, I'd live in a cool place, but I wouldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think even being in college, I went to St.
Mm,
Pius, and there was a lot of people that felt that going to the University of New Mexico was like your
mm,
backup safety school.
mm-hmm.
But I saw it as such a huge opportunity because I
Yeah,
was offered the ability to go there basically free of charge, and the possibilities that it gave me were amazing. Like the
yeah,
ability to go abroad, the
mm-hmm.
ability to take part in Model UN, to take part in debate, to take part
Yeah,
in classes with fantastic professors.
mm-hmm.
So I didn't see it as like a second choice at all. It was my first choice,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
was so grateful for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the University of New Mexico does get a bad rap, and you know, there's it has its downfall. Sometimes I remember at one point I looked back, I found a stack of old papers, and I was like, "Whoa, I did not deserve that grade." But I'm a tough grader, right? I think
Yeah.
as a teacher, but it did foster a lot of who I am, and it wasn't my first choice, honestly. But because I knew early on, I traveled a little bit in high school.
Mhm.
Um, I knew that I wanted to study abroad, and I knew that cost was going to be an issue. So it was either go out of state or stay at UNM. The university near mom is what I heard it called, UNM. But I or go to UNM, and study abroad in this phenomenal study abroad program. They have so many connections, you know,
Oh,
and they really they bring in a lot of really cool people from other countries as well to UNM.
definitely.
So I mean, I got to work in those programs as well, mostly as a volunteer, right? It was called something else then. Now it's Geo.
Voice. Yeah.
OIPS. Oh, it's called OIPS. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's called OIPS. But but yeah, no, it very, very kind of similar idea as you, right? I didn't go to a private school, but the idea was just like travel. How can I travel? This craving for culture, this craving for language as well.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you
then
were definitely always right there with me with all these very international groups. And we've also met each other abroad. And I feel that you're kind of a person that adjusts to the culture that you're either the
yeah,
person you're speaking to or where you are very easily. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
see
and I
that
think
in you as well.
it's something that I think people who grew up with this dualism kind of have an
Mhm.
ease with, right? You just kind of you're a chameleon of sorts. Whether
Yeah.
it comes to the language, you just feel like I'm just here to hang out and do whatever everyone else is doing. Which is yeah, I mean, but after that, I mean, was Germany your the place that you went to after? Because that's where I visited you all.
Yeah.
It was okay.
I actually did, no, I mean, I did an internship in London in between.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, so it was only for the summer.
Mm,
So yeah, after graduating, I got an internship at the Institute of Economic Affairs in London. So that
nice.
is a think tank in Westminster that is very much towards free market economics.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, really interesting. We got to work with members of parliament in
Nice.
London, and
Awesome.
I worked with people that I honestly never thought I would work with.
Mm-hmm.
People around me were all grads of like Oxford and Cambridge. And
Right.
it was a very interesting experience, but I enjoed it. And it
Right.
was only after that that I moved to Berlin.
Okay, okay. But I mean, I think doing what, right? The World Affairs delegation, UNM was
Mhm.
kind of the oddball in the group as well at
Yeah.
those events. It was a lot of Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
And then you're like UNM, but there we were, and there you are, you know. So it makes sense. It checks out. So, um, what did you went to grad school in Berlin, or was it you worked and did both, right?
Yes. So I learned about the possibilities to do master's degrees in Germany while I was working in the International Student Organization and in the
Mm,
international office at UNM.
mm-hmm.
I learned that the master's programs in Germany are A, mostly taught in English, and B, free. So
Geez,
two things
I
that
did
I thought
not
were
know
great.
that. Wow.
Yeah, so just
you're the smart one of
FYI.
the smart one of the group. Okay.
So it was interesting because I had considered potentially taking a year out to
Mm,
travel, but doing a master's degree in Germany felt like a
yeah.
really great option. I could learn a new language. I would
Mm-hmm.
have a base from which to travel anywhere I wanted, really, especially in Europe. And it was a pretty interesting um, school that I went to in terms of economics. So it was,
How
yeah,
so?
it
Can you
seemed like a really
elaborate?
natural fit.
Can you elaborate on how it was interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much the opposite of what I had been doing in London in terms of economic thought.
I mean,
It
it
was,
was just opposite of the free market or
yeah. Well, I mean, there's you could go into a lot of detail here, but it was both basically like focused on post Keynesianism, and
mm,
I think it's been interesting to see like different schools of thought playing out,
yeah.
especially in crises like this.
Mm-hmm.
But we had people from all different schools attending, so it was just interesting to get a much broader point of view when it
Yeah.
came to my field of study. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. I mean, that's all super that's what grad school is about. That's what I
Yeah.
loved about it myself is the fact that like you're pulling in people from all over the world to this program
Hmm.
and you're discussing these different ideas through different lenses and you know, not getting upset, not getting, you know, gaslighting each other. You're just like, okay, well, like think about it this way. And you start doing that
Yeah.
academic jargon and those academic answers that I always joke about. And I always deal with academics and they ask me a question, I'll respond with like, well, yes and no, or
Yeah.
depends, or define insert word. right?
Yeah,
Because there's no
exactly.
direct answer that you can actually give because I'm not the expert in the subject matter that you're talking about. But I think grad school
Yeah.
really develops that in you, right? The ability to kind of think critically.
Yeah.
Is that what happened with you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was always someone who would dig deeper because one of the studies that I did, I almost got a
Hmm.
minor in philosophy at UNM.
Hmm.
So there was this kind of sense of consistently questioning to get to
Mm-hmm.
uh, not an answer, but a little bit to a deeper understanding of a
Mm-hmm.
question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in grad school, you have the opportunity to do that in a particular subject manner.
Yeah.
I had also done debate for so long that
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was always interesting to understand both points of view,
Yeah.
and to understand that there are very few black and white, yes and no answers in this
Mm-hmm.
world.
Right.
So even people who are ardent supporters of one school of thought, for example, in economics, the world doesn't always act the way it does in models. So to really like kind of dig deeper, like you
Right.
said, understand, think critically, and be
Mm-hmm.
okay with not having a clear answer sometimes.
Right. That's very difficult for a lot of social scientists.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the data. But I very much come from a cross methods background of qualitative and quantitative. I think you really need to contextualize things. So, but again, take it with a grain of salt, or else you can't just throw everything out, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fit everyone. So you do have to be able to kind of use it in some way. Um, what was Berlin like? I mean, I know it as a tourist, but it's a capital city, but it's not an
Yeah.
expensive city.
No,
Um,
Berlin's amazing.
I mean,
I
yes.
will consider it my second home forever. Like I'm coming up almost on the time, the same length of time that I lived in Berlin. I have been living in Oslo nearly,
Yeah.
but Berlin was like it just took my life by storm in a way. I moved there when I was 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I got an apartment for 250 euros a month, which is now impossible, by the way.
Oh, really? Did it
So
go
I
up?
really, huh?
Really? It went up?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. But I felt so free. I'd never been
Mm,
in such a huge city. There was basically everything you could imagine available to you in Berlin. It changed a lot in the time I was there, and
mm-hmm.
every time I go back, I'm still really surprised at how much it's changed.
Okay.
But I'd never been in a city like that before, and
Right.
there was every type of person, and you could be
Mm-hmm.
free to be whomever you wanted at any point
Yeah.
of time, and you could be a different person on Monday than you were on Saturday. So I think that was all an amazing experience to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think from what I noticed is that there's so much history there, right?
Yeah,
That we read about and that you get to see in the physical structures that are all around you. But then there's so many young people there. Um,
yeah.
and everyone seemed very nice. I mean, I think we were literally, I don't know if you were there, you might have been at work, but I was walking across the bridge somewhere
Hmm.
with Amanda and with Heather, and
Yeah.
I run into somebody that I was in film school with in Albuquerque, and I was
No,
like,
I had no idea.
yeah, and I'm like, wow, I'm like, what are you doing here? That's so strange, but it strangely felt like home, right? Very
Yeah.
comfortable, very fun, no pressure. It was such a good time. I would say, I wish I could go back, but I just haven't got the opportunity to. You and Heather let me stay on your tiny couch.
Yeah,
And then that
definitely.
tiny, tiny couch, and then you just fed me schnapps.
Of
Um,
course.
eh, yeah,
We
no,
had
it was
to
great.
full experience.
It was
I
such a
mean,
good
yeah,
time. Yeah.
just it was crazy. I lived first in West Berlin, in what was
Hmm.
formerly West Berlin,
Hmm.
and I eventually moved to what was formerly East Berlin, just
Yeah.
because I found that it suited me better. And it's very true that the different neighborhoods in Berlin have different personalities.
Right.
So eventually, I found my perfect place,
Hmm.
but it does definitely feel like home. It's a very laid back place. People are nice, but Berliners, like true Berliners, I think pride themselves a little bit on being rude. Um,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I got some of that. I was on my
yeah.
way back to the airport, and it's like, I don't know English. I was like, you definitely know English, but okay.
I mean, I learned German there as well, so
I
I,
mean,
I loved it.
are
And
you
it changed.
fluent now?
I can speak pretty well. I haven't practiced a lot.
Mm,
In my current job, I am an account manager, and I do have businesses in my portfolio that are based in the DACH region, so
mm,
Germany, Austria, and Switzerland.
okay.
So I'm getting the opportunity to practice a little more now.
Okay.
But I was definitely working in German. I had at least working proficiency, if not fluency.
Okay.
So I love German as a language. It's great.
What other languages are you working on now?
I'm working on Norwegian.
How's that?
um, I think Norwegian is interesting. It's a simpler language. It's definitely simpler to learn. It's obviously a less useful language in the sense that less people speak it.
Sure.
I think that German, I speak English, Spanish, and German very comfortably. And
Hmm.
I think German has been the language to open the most doors,
Okay.
interestingly enough, in my life. Um, but Norwegian is also, I think it's a different phase of life,
Mm,
honestly. I was a student when I was in Germany, so I had a lot of time to dedicate to learning German, and I had an inbuilt social circle of people that included Germans.
hmm.
So I was able to practice much more readily than I am Norwegian.
Hmm.
I haven't had the ability to like make the same amount of Norwegian friends as I did in Germany. It's just when you're in your 30s and you go somewhere new,
Yeah.
it's or even late 20s. I moved here in my 20s. It's
Yeah.
a different life, a different phase of life. So
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, you're not partying as much. You're not
no.
going out meeting just random people. It's different, right? Things just shift a little bit. So,
Yeah.
tell me about it. I'm feeling it too. Yeah, I think you're the only one of my friends that's younger than me, but it's only like a couple of months, right? So I
Yeah.
was just like, I'm not the
I'll
youngest.
take it.
It's just fine. You're the baby. You're just fine. You look great. You know. But yeah, no, that's really awesome that you're doing all that. And how's the kind of current state of the world impacted Norway and you?
Sorry, repeat. Affecting?
Yeah, affecting you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting question because um, Norway closed down pretty early in terms of obviously the current situation with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
It closed its borders very early. I think it was honestly a shock. It wasn't so bad when Norway closed its borders, but when the US closed its borders, it was the first time in my life that I wasn't able to just easily go home.
Mm-hmm.
So, having lived far away for so long, it was so strange to wake up to a push notification saying that the president had closed the borders and that if you wanted to get home, you had to get home now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of friends who have been affected by this in terms
Yeah.
of losing their job or being furloughed, which is a paid thing in Norway. It's
Mm-hmm.
called permittert. So
Mm-hmm.
you're able to be furloughed for a specific amount of time, and the government will pay a certain percentage of your income.
Okay.
So I think it's a little bit, yeah, it's okay for most people, but
Sure.
it's definitely affected. I've been able to maintain my full-time job. I've been studying Norwegian. I've been trying to run a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do
Yeah.
what I can to keep things relatively normal.
Are
But
you are you staying home? Is there a stay-at-home order or not really?
yeah, it's only been currently in the last couple weeks that they've started opening things up, only
Okay.
because there's been essentially no new cases in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
We were a few weeks ahead of the United States in terms of, getting the numbers up in infections and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've opened up pretty much, like bars are open, restaurants are open. As long as they appreciate social distancing, then they're allowed to be open.
Okay. So it's pretty much on par with everywhere else.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the strange thing is that we're still not allowed to travel, and they've kind of given the directive that until mid-June at least, no travel to Nordic countries, mid-July, perhaps Europe, and then not until the end of August are they considering allowing us to travel further than that. So
Geez, didn't you have some big plans coming up this summer?
yeah, I did.
So what's going on with that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That did affect that. I was due to get married on the 18th of July
Mm-hmm.
to my wonderful partner, whose name is Ashin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, we were supposed to get married, but that's not happening anymore. And we were also supposed to go on a honeymoon, which was also supposed to be great.
Well, I mean, it's just postponed, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been actually very, very lucky that all our
Hmm.
vendors have been very nice and allowed us to postpone to 2021
Yeah. Okay.
July without any financial, not losing any money.
Hmm.
So,
That's really nice. I mean, that makes
yeah.
sense. My sister's due to get married this year too, and she's kind of hers is in October, but
Oh,
we'll see, right? But I mean, it's impacting a lot of quote unquote plans, right? I haven't been able to
yeah.
do any of the traveling that I was going to do in April or May.
Oh, no,
Um,
where were you meant to go?
just domestically. I mean, visiting people in LA, going out to Chicago for a little bit, stuff like that. But that's not happening. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'll save up some money and do a big international trip at the beginning of next year.
Yeah.
You know,
I
I
mean, it's certainly like a
mhm.
big, we're saving a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I realized that I was just bored before. It wasn't that I needed the things. I think I was just bored. I was like, I got the money and just screw it, spend it.
Yeah.
And they definitely seemed like a necessity back then, and not necessarily
Mhm.
anymore. So, which is fine. Being in account management myself, things are tight, and it's good to be able to save right from one month to the
Yeah,
next.
definitely.
But yeah, so I mean, what are you doing with your degree necessarily, or are you hoping to move forward? I know when you came back last time, we were at Heather's house and we joked around with the idea of like the think tank. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was like,
That
oh
was a
yeah,
great idea.
yeah, we should do like the think tank. But like, have you thought of you're very bright, you're a very smart
Yeah.
individual. I always look up to you in that sense. But have you ever thought of putting your knowledge to that sort of use?
Well, I think my entire career, which is now spanned about almost 10 years,
Hmm.
it's 10 years basically of my career. My focus has been on doing good and doing so
Hmm.
scalably. And the way that I've always
Hmm.
chosen to do that is through private business.
Hmm.
This is an idea that was put in my mind during my time in Berlin when we
Hmm.
had a person come in. She's former McKinsey. She went on to form her own consulting company.
Hmm.
And she was talking about using business to create impact. So, and I think this idea is more widespread now than it was at the time, but to create environmental sustainability and or economic development in the society in which they work.
Hmm.
Um, so I found that super interesting. And I actually ended up working with that consultancy in Berlin for quite a long time, about 4 years, first as an intern and then as a consultant. And I went on to work in a very similar consultancy. So, working with private businesses to create supply chains that benefit everyone involved and still make a profit for the company.
Hmm.
An example being, um, a beer company that's in on the African continent,
Yeah.
thinking about what crops they could use that are local crops that would employ local farmers
Yeah.
instead of flying in crops from Europe, for example.
Hmm.
Um, that was great work. And I
Yeah.
started seeing more and more that technology was a way to further scale that good that we were doing.
Sure.
So I started getting involved in technology companies and startups.
Mm.
And I was in a couple interesting ones. So I
Okay.
was involved in one Bitcoin one that actually failed out of California.
Mm.
Um, I was only in it a very brief period of time, but it was looking at using Bitcoin to do instant remittances between, at that time, the Philippines and the United States.
Okay.
Um, but what I do now is I I was looking for again to go into a private company instead of being a consultant. The idea being that instead of giving guidance, I wanted to own the business. I wanted to be
Mm.
in every single detail of the business. I wanted
Hmm.
to build the business. So I got in touch. This will be 5 years ago
Okay.
this autumn with someone in Oslo in a company called Gelato, which is a tech company
Hmm.
that's working in the area of printing.
Okay.
It was never on my radar
Hmm.
to work in this industry, but I spoke to him and he told me what a big industry it was. He told me about the environmental impact of the pulp production, so paper production,
Hmm.
about transporting printed goods from one continent to another, which happens a lot, And I was really interested. It was also a small company at the time. It's now scaled to about 200 different people in the company. So it was an opportunity to learn a business from the bottom up and
Yeah.
to see someone who was experienced in doing that create a business.
Okay.
So that's what I've been doing for the last almost 5 years.
Nice. That's, I mean, that's really good work. That's really cool. And it sounds like you just had a path from the beginning and you had this foresight as to what you wanted to do and you've kind of followed through with that, right? I mean, it evolves over time and different
Yes.
opportunities present themselves, things fail.
Yeah.
And the others, you're just like, wait, I've been here how long?
Yeah, exactly.
But it sounds like you're on a good path and that's really awesome. And it always makes me happy to hear that. Um, yeah, I mean, is there any organizations out there while I have you here that you think that people should who are listening should help out to or reach out to? Anything like that you want to plug? I mean, while you have the stage.
Well, I mean, I'm always the biggest fan of local businesses. So, I
Hmm.
mean, I know Albuquerque is a big local business place, but
Hmm.
I think being local is really important. It cuts down on the environmental carbon footprint of the things that you buy.
Okay.
I also say consume less when you can. We really don't
Yeah.
need most of the things that we have.
Hmm.
So, being mindful about the way that one consumes.
Hmm.
And as much as possible to be aware of the supply chain of the things that you may take for granted. So the cup of coffee that you buy
Yeah.
or the food that you purchase or
Hmm.
sweaters, like especially when it comes to fast fashion, just
Yeah.
to understand and do a little bit of research to be mindful of the supply chain behind the purchases you make, because it truly is like the expression voting with your dollar.
Hmm.
um, you are choosing to support businesses every time you make a purchase. So to be very aware of who you're supporting, and the best is if you can see them right in front of you with local businesses.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So local vendors, stuff like
Mm.
that. Anything you can do, that's always really good. Any words of wisdom for the youngins?
Um, I think take it slow. I think that
Okay.
life goes so fast, and you'll
Mm,
have so many opportunities. I know I was always racing from one thing to the next, and it is okay to take it slow and to enjoy the phase you're in. I'm glad that I did that in some ways, and I wish
yeah.
I had done it more in others.
Mm,
Um, and to also, don't worry about what other people say.
sure.
So, the reason I mentioned the University of New Mexico, for example, is if I had taken the advice of people around me, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, and met the wonderful people that I've met along the way and had the opportunities that I've had.
Mm.
So, yeah, to just question and think for yourself, and don't be worried about doing that, because your intuition is probably somewhat correct. And yeah, but do listen to people who have experience.
But listen to your parents, folks.
Yeah, actually, saying that over
You
here.
you never thought you'd say that out loud, but here you are
I know.
in your 30s telling the youngins to listen to their parents. No, thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna hit pause and then we'll just quickly debrief. But again, it's always great talking to you. I can't wait to get to see you again.
Yeah,
And if you ever want to come back on, chat, plug anything, just let me know. Okay.
definitely.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks for
so much.
listening, guys.